Hey everyone, John Lorden here. Thank you so much for joining me today on Brain Scratch Case Cracked. This episode filmed for Tuesday, November 14th, 2017. I hope each and every one of you out there is having a very good week so far. This case, I feel like it's what I would consider mostly cracked. I certainly want to cover it. There's a lot of very strong developments going on here, but I think that there are a lot of questions that we're left with at the end of it. I still think it's a pretty good fit for Case Cracked. So today we're going to talk about the Gypsy Hill murders. San Mateo County is in the San Francisco Bay Area in Northern California. In the 1970s, just over 500,000 people lived in that county. At the north end, you have the San Francisco International Airport, and the southern end of the county is the start of Silicon Valley. In 1976, several young women would be murdered, and one of them was found on a road named Gypsy Hills. This would be the start of a mystery that has spanned decades called the Gypsy Hill murders. January 8th, Veronica Casillo's partially nude body was discovered face down in a creek in her hometown of Pacifica. She had suffered 30 stab wounds and had been sexually assaulted. Veronica was a part-time college student and only 18 years old. She was last seen waiting for a bus to take her to her campus. A few weeks later, a 14-year-old named Titania Blackwell went missing. Her body would be found on June 6th off Gypsy Hill Road, also in Pacifica. She had also suffered numerous stab wounds. On February 2nd, 17-year-old Paula Baxter went missing after rehearsal for her high school play. Her body was found 2 days later behind a Church of Latter-day Saints in Millbrae. Paula was also found once again with multiple stab wounds and had been sexually assaulted. However, one minor difference from the other cases is that Paula had also been struck in the head with a chunk of concrete. Police somehow linked the Baxter killing to Casillo's forensically at the time, though I can't find any details on exactly what that link was. Unfortunately, they didn't have enough info to identify or name a suspect at that time, and the murders continued. Carol Booth was reported missing by her husband on March 15th from their home in South San Francisco. The 26-year-old was found in a shallow grave on May 6th. On April 1st, the body of Denise Lampe was found in her parked car at Serramonte Mall in Daly City. She was supposed to meet up with a friend that night, but never showed up. Someone noticed her body in the Mustang as they were walking by. She was only 19 years old and had been stabbed 20 times. The community became concerned that they had a serial killer on the loose. They called the killer the San Mateo Slasher, and the deaths became known as the Gypsy Hill murders. All of the victims were brunette and close in age. Several of the bodies were found in wooded areas with knife wounds and signs of sexual assault. One victim that didn't completely match the profile of the others was named Michelle Mitchell. While she was 19 years old, Michelle had lighter hair and she didn't really share the same facial similarities as the other women. She was also last seen alive in Reno, Nevada, more than 200 miles away from the other victims. Michelle was found in a garage with her hands bound and her throat slashed. 3 years later, a mental patient at Louisiana State University Medical Center confessed to killing a woman named Michelle. Kathy Woods would be convicted of killing Michelle Mitchell and sentenced to life in prison. Investigators continued to struggle with a lack of evidence and witnesses with the other cases. Their investigation finally stalled out and the cases went cold. Perhaps they had the San Mateo Slasher already in prison with the conviction of Kathy Woods? However, in 2014, the FBI established a new task force to look into these murders. They processed new DNA samples and raised a very interesting truth. DNA found on a Marlboro cigarette butt at the crime scene of the Michelle Mitchell murder matched a semen sample that was found on one of the San Mateo victims. The conclusion that the San Mateo Slasher also killed Michelle Mitchell in Reno was indeed correct. But that meant the slasher was clearly a man. Kathy Woods was released from prison, pending a new trial, but then the charges were eventually totally dismissed. Her attorney says that she only initially admitted to the murder to try to get a better room in the mental institution she was staying at. She served over 30 years in prison for a crime that she did not commit. Rodney Halbauer, 66, was named by the FBI as the man matching the new DNA samples, and on January 22nd of 2015, he was charged with the murders of Paula Baxter and Veronica Casillo. Rodney had already been serving time in prison for kidnapping and attempted murder. He has pled not guilty for the two murders he's now charged with, and a court date has been set. The judge set his bail amount at $10 million. Case cracked, right? We have our slasher. Well, not quite. While we have 3 of the cases that have now been connected to Rodney, 2 of which he's going to face in court, we still have 3 other cases that are left unsolved. Could there have been more than one killer in that list of cases that has been grouped together as the Gypsy Hill murders? Last week, another suspect has been arrested, specifically in connection with the death of Denise Lampe. Once again, thanks to DNA evidence. Daly City Police were reprocessing the evidence in an effort to connect Rodney to Denise's case, and they got a big surprise. A blood stain on Denise's jacket came back as a match to a different convict. Leon Melvin Seymour, 71 years old, is now being charged with her murder. Leon has a long history of violent sexual crimes and has been in and out of prison for a lot of his life. He was even originally questioned about the murders back in the 70s, but obviously authorities didn't have enough to name him a suspect. 40 years later, that is no longer the case. Leon is scheduled to appear in court on January 12th, 2018 for a preliminary hearing the same month that Rodney's criminal trial is set to begin. The big questions for me at this point are, did these 2 men possibly work together, or were they completely separate and working individually? Did grouping these killings together and creating the mental image of one slasher help or hinder the investigation into these cases? Will the authorities find some way to link one or both of the men back to the unsolved cases of Carol Booth and Titania Blackwell? Also, will authorities wind up charging Rodney with Michelle Mitchell's murder, or is the DNA found on the cigarette butt not quite enough to win that case? Kathy Woods is now known as the longest ever wrongfully incarcerated woman in U.S. history. She has multiple lawsuits filed seeking damages for losing so many years of her life after being falsely imprisoned. The garage that Michelle Mitchell's body was found in has been demolished. Now, please keep in mind, these cases are, of course, considered innocent until proven guilty. However, with the DNA matches that we're talking about here, I'm sure the defense team has some serious work cut out for them for both Leon and Rodney. And ultimately, it really comes down to the families. And I truly hope that the families of all the victims in these cases do find at least some sense of peace in knowing who these guys are and what they potentially did to their family members, or find that ultimate win of justice that they're looking for. But we're just getting started with the court proceedings here, so that justice might be a little ways coming. And of course, these are court proceedings. You know, things don't always go as expected with these cases. So I'll certainly be keeping an eye out for updates on these cases. And if anything significant happens, I will be sure to shoot an update and let all you guys know. So a little bit different for a case cracked, because I know it's not quite set, but I think that with the evidence that they're talking about, we're looking at least 2 of these men that have been found for these 6 murders, and answers in what seems like 4 of the murders that are pretty strong. The other 2 I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if more evidence can be produced or if other things happen during the court proceedings, like perhaps if they try to arrange some type of plea bargain deal and get a confession out of one or both of these men for one or both of the other cases. I think that would be the best outcome in terms of the families at least knowing what happened to their loved ones. But we'll have to see if either of these guys has the decency to do something like that and go down that path. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Case Cracked. I appreciate each and every one of you out there. Take care, and I'll see you right back here on the Lord and Arch channel.